first time that I can remember noticing my narcolepsy was my freshman year. I was laying with my boyfriend at the time in my basement, and I just remember having this overwhelming feeling that I was being such a bad girlfriend because I had no energy to get up and do anything. Even though we had just been laying there for hours, all I could think about was how we hadn't been doing anything, and even though I really wanted to go do something to try and do something fun with him, all I could think about was that how I had no energy to go up and do it, even though I had been resting all day. When I really started noticing it was about like my sophomore year. I was sitting in class, and even though I had a really interesting teacher, I couldn't help but fall asleep every day in that class. I remember thinking, like, why can't I control this? Because it seemed like every single day, no matter what I did, even if I drank coffee or got a good night's sleep, I could never seem to stay awake. And it was one of those times where you're sitting in class and your head falls forward and you snap back out of it. And I was just waiting for like a teacher to make fun of me or to have like a student point it out. And so I was always just really nervous that, you know, I had this thing that I couldn't control and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't stay awake, and I just kept falling asleep. So one of the interesting things about my condition that's pretty specific to me is that I do this weird sleepwalking thing. So as soon as I would sit up in my bed, I would wake up. I was still dreaming, but I'd be fully awake. I could see my surroundings. I knew what was going on. I could no longer see my dream, but I knew exactly what was going on. So I'd be still talking to the people that were there and things like that. Even though I was wide awake, I would still continue to play out my dream. I eventually learned to control my dreams, so I could alter my dream and put myself back to bed. So I would wake up and be talking to someone and I'd say, like, I'm sorry, but I have to go back to bed. And I would actually like walk back to my bed and get in bed and put myself back to sleep. So it's really interesting because no one's been able to tell me why I'm able to sleepwalk but while awake. So the first doctor that I saw, he had a really heavy accent. I went in and got a sleep study done, and my mom was with me at this doctor, and he told me that I either had a REM disorder or narcolepsy. My mom has an unrelated sleeping condition, and she had been on stimulants before, and so she had a really bad opinion of stimulants. So she decided that the best way to go was to treat me for a REM disorder, so it's treating me during the nighttime, so that way I get a good night's sleep, so that way I'll be refreshed in the morning, rather than treating me during the day to keep me awake, which is what they would do if I had narcolepsy. So mom and the doctor decided that they were going to treat me for the REM disorder. But what ended up happening is I would wake up during the night sleepwalking, but since I was on a sleeping pill and a muscle relaxant, I would fling my arms around and do everything that I was doing before, just without as much control. So I was still pretty groggy and stuff like that. So I immediately realized that that was not working. And every morning I'd still wake up super tired and struggling throughout the day. So we pretty soon realized that it wasn't going to be the REM disorder. That doctor was not the clearest, and he seemed really slacking about the condition. He wasn't, he didn't take it very seriously, it seemed like, and it was really hard to communicate with him. So I ended up going to see another doctor who was extremely, really nice. He was very clear with me. He said, whatever you want to do is what we'll do. He was a lot more warm and inviting and comforting and helping me understand what I was going through and the best way to go through it. So then he ended up putting me on stimulants, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I still see that doctor. It was a lot more clear. I could understand him. I felt like someone actually knew what was going on rather than the doctor who was just trying to throw me on different things to see what would work. So that's when I was diagnosed and started a treatment. So some of the symptoms, when I was first getting diagnosed, I did a sleep study, which is a series of 5 naps. You stay the night first, and nothing showed up abnormal in my overnight test. And then you do the series of 5 naps in a day. So you go in, they give you 20 minutes to fall asleep. If you don't fall asleep, or if you do, it doesn't matter. Then they wake you up after that 20 minutes. You're hooked up to a bunch of wires and all that. They're monitoring your brain waves, monitoring what kind of sleep you get into, and all those things, your heart rate. So when I did the 5 sleep, after they woke me up, the first thing they asked me was, did I dream? And in 3 of the 5 naps, I could remember dreaming. And that's a symptom for narcolepsy because you go into REM sleep quicker than most people do. So in those naps, I went straight into the deepest stage of sleep. So that's how I got diagnosed, was because of those naps and my ability to go into REM sleep. The other symptoms are when I'm just doing day-to-day things. If I'm not stimulated, I'll be exhausted no matter what I'm doing. I could rest all day or be extremely active and intrigued in something, and I will still feel really fatigued. So when it gets bad, I will be laying down or sitting, and I won't even be able to feel like I can move. It feels like, it's physically impossible to even just lift up my arms or anything. Like, even thinking slows down. I try not to think about, school-related things just because it feels mentally tasking. So it's not like you're just, feeling tired like people do after a long day. It's all throughout the day. I feel like I've been hit by a brick wall. I don't feel like I can move. I don't feel like I can function. I don't feel like having conversations with people. Like, having a conversation with someone sounds extremely taxing. So I choose not to at those points. I remember when I was diagnosed, I was going into my senior year, and senior year is a hard time. You already have your friends built, and people are just really judgmental. So when I found out this big thing that was going on in my life, it felt really awkward for me to go and tell people because I didn't know how they would react to it. Since I had already had these friends, it was like such a weird thing to implement this disorder into those friendships. Everything felt normal. I didn't want to be different from my friends and things like that. So for me to go and tell my friends that, I thought they would, question me or, kind of make fun of me. I wasn't really sure how they would react to it. And the only way to confirm narcolepsy is by doing a spinal tap and confirming that there is a lack of neurons in a specific part of the brain. It's extremely painful and pretty unnecessary. So if you have the symptoms, then they treat you for it. So having that kind of gray area of not having like an actual confirmed diagnosis, from a medical standpoint, even though that's what I'm being treated for, I felt really insecure about talking about it because there was that like gray area, be like, oh, well, it's not proven, so how do you know that's exactly what's going on? So I just chose not to talk about it, and it took me a long time to open up about that to other people. When I came to CMU, I had no idea that student disability services was a thing. I started seeing the school psychiatrist for my depression medication, and she asked me, if I registered my depression on my SDS. And I had no idea what she was talking about. So she was really helpful in getting me to understand the benefits of being signed up for student disability services, and she helped me fill out my forms. So when I have like a rough day with narcolepsy, I call them like episodes. The first episode I had, I was in biology class in Brooks, and I was in lab, and we were doing a group worksheet. I just started to feel off, even though I take my medication. So we were supposed to leave to go to the greenhouse to finish our worksheet. And I went to the professor, and I was like, I really don't feel good. I don't have my medication on me, so would it be okay if I went back to my room and got it? And she was totally okay with it. She told me to go ahead, and then I could just meet them back at wherever they were. So, like, as I was walking back to my room in Emmons, I felt like I didn't know where I was going. I, couldn't see. I felt like nothing was around me. I could only, sense what was in, a 3-foot circumference around me. Everything else was just, white. I wasn't registering anything. It's basically, as if it wasn't there. I was just in this little bubble, and I was just focused on putting one foot in front of the other and going back to my room. When I got back to my room, I took my medication and went back to class feeling the same. It just became more persistent throughout the day and the class. And after class, when I got back to my room, I wasn't even able to have a coherent thought about anything. I was just sitting in my bed and realized there was no way I could walk to another classroom. So I slept out the rest of the day. I even wrote an email to my professor because I didn't want to miss the next lab that I was supposed to go to, saying that I don't know if this email makes any sense, but I cannot come to class today. I sent that email and I went to bed. Some of the hard parts about having narcolepsy is that people like to make jokes about it, and I usually don't mind, except for when I'm telling somebody in like a serious situation. They tell me jokes that like, oh, I must have narcolepsy too. I get that all the time whenever I tell people that, which is really kind of frustrating because, you know, I can just say that I have narcolepsy and they'll be like, oh yeah, you're really sleepy all the time. Like I must have that too. It comes with a lot of questions, and a lot of the time I get kind of ridiculed for it. People will tell me that my symptoms are, you know, that I'm just a normal college student, or, you know, they couldn't understand that narcolepsy doesn't have to be where I pass out every 5 minutes and, you know, drop to the floor falling asleep. So a lot of people can take it really seriously and kind of try to tell me that I don't have narcolepsy. They become, you know, kind of a minute doctor, know everything about the condition. And then other people just like to, you know, kind of make light of it and make jokes about it, which I don't mind at times, but to a certain extent, it can just be a little frustrating. I take 2 doses of Adderall a day to stay awake and get all my homework done and, you know, make sure I'm able to function through classes. But since Adderall is such an abused drug, my doctors have to mail me a handwritten script, and then I have to take it to the pharmacy and get filled. Being busy, sometimes I'll forget to call, and I'll run out, because it takes, you know, a couple days for the script to get here, and then I have to take it to the pharmacy. And being on a college campus, there always seems to be a shortage of Adderall. So usually, if I don't time it perfectly, I have to go like a day or two without it, just because the timing is so particular. The last time that I forgot to call and I ran out, by the time that I got it, I was off of this medication for 3 days by the time I got the script. When I submitted my script, I knew it wasn't going to be filled for a while. So the symptoms I was feeling, I was just extremely fatigued. I had no energy to get through class. I was really just doing only what I had to do. You know, if I had to go to class, I would just go to class and then come back and go to sleep. Then after a few days after that, I started getting more physical symptoms. I noticed while I was holding, you know, my phone that I couldn't read my screen because my hands were so shaky. So fighting the both withdrawal and the narcolepsy at the same time, I couldn't go to class because you kind of get that backlash of not having the stimulant on top of the narcolepsy, and it just completely wiped me out. So I was physically strained, mentally strained, and being off of the medication, I really just had to lay in bed and wait until I could get a script filled. Having narcolepsy has taught me a lot about hitting really rough patches in my life, and they're not always being an instant fix. But I've learned that pursuing your goals is always achievable. There's not always an easy solution or a better life that's easily in view. But even though you may not know it, I have found that persistence will really help you achieve your goals. Those success stories you hear when they say you can do anything when you put your mind to it is really true. It doesn't happen in a week. It might take months or years. A little bit of effort each day, like me just having to force myself to get all out of bed, is what makes all the difference. I hear all the time people tell me that, you know, I'm not going to be able to become a doctor, or people even tell me that they don't even know how I'm in school. But I find that every single day you just have to overcome something small, like getting out of bed and just going to class, and that kind of snowballs into you doing great things. So even though, you know, college didn't seem like an option, or becoming a doctor doesn't seem like becoming an option now, I know that if I put my mind to it and make small steps every single day, that one day I am able to get there. I'm Shelby Miller, and I have narcolepsy.